Northeast England, the Five Frontiers, the River Tees, Part 4, Viking Legacies, a Worm, a Sword and a Helmet. Written and narrated by David Simpson. englandsnortheast.co.uk. In our previous explorations of the history of the frontier of the Tees, we discovered the borderland role the valley played in the settlement of the Vikings, and investigated the legacy of Viking place names in the landscape and the mystery of the Viking hogback stones. As one of the five frontiers of the region, the Tees, along with neighbouring North Yorkshire, was no stranger to Scottish raids. As we discovered in our first visit to the valley, the Tees for a short time effectively formed the Scottish border and was an oft-chosen route for Scottish raids. However, it was the valley's role as the northern frontier of Viking settlement that really defines the region we call the Northeast. It gave Teesdale, Teesside, Cleveland and the Vale of the Tees around Darlington a distinct identity later reinforced by industrial and cultural developments. We discovered the Tees was a flashpoint in the violent struggles of the internecine wars within the Kingdom of Northumbria, rooted in rivalry between the earlier kingdoms of Deira and Bernicia. It was a weakness that exposed the kingdom to the invasion of the Vikings, who settled up to and along the Tees. We saw how continuing cross-border rivalry centred on the Tees in Viking times led to the demise of Eric Bloodaxe on remote Stainmore, and the pilgrimage of King Canute to Durham, to which he gifted lands along the Tees. If the Tees is indeed a borderland, then the sleepy meander of Sockburn-on-Tees, southeast of Darlington, is its southernmost point, and seems very distant from the story of borders, battles and Bloodaxe. Here, at what was traditionally the most southern point of County Durham, the secluded river peninsula is surrounded on three sides by Yorkshire. In this lush lowland vale, the Tees twists and turns as slow and silent as a serpent, and it is no more apparent than at Sockburn. Though barely accessible today, Sockburn is one of the most intriguing spots on the whole course of the River Tees. It is certainly sock-like in shape, but the name may derive from a soak or limit of jurisdiction, or possibly a nickname, Socker, the Sockman. The second part of the name was not a burn at all, but a burh, a fortified place. Sockburn was an important sacred site in Anglo-Saxon Northumbria, and probably in earlier times too. Its Christian importance was reflected in it being the venue for the consecration of Highbald, a bishop of Lindisfarne in AD 780, and Eanbald, a bishop of York in 796. Both bishops were blessed with the waters of the Tees that doubtless formed the boundary of their bishoprics. In Viking times, Sockburn became a significant location for those hogback sculptures that we explored in our previous visit to the Tees, with 9 found on this spot at the long abandoned ruins of Sockburn's 13th century church. This is a church without a village, though Gursby, the village where the Vikings raised pigs or grizzer, is just across the water on the Yorkshire side. The process by which Sockburn later came under the influence of the Vikings is as ever unclear, but it seems the hogback sculptures reflected a Viking desire to adopt Christian ways yet retain the heritage of their homeland culture. Sockburn, most intriguingly, is the home to a legend that is surely tied to its Anglo-Saxon and Norse roots. This was the domain of the Sockburn worm, a wyvern-like creature that reputedly terrorised the neighbourhood. Worms, or orms, as they are called in Norse, are a feature of both Anglo-Saxon and Viking mythology, and some have speculated the stories of the worms being chopped into pieces allude to attempts to break up snaking parties of invading Viking warriors in times past. The Sockburn worm's close cousin, the Lambton worm of Wearside, has far greater fame today, made known by a Tyneside music hall song of the 19th century. But in earlier times, the Sockburn worm was far better known and the older of the two legends. The Sockburn worm, the legend claims, was eventually slain by a sword-wielding knight, and the very sword can still be seen in the museum at Durham Cathedral. The worm's slayer is usually described as Sir John Conyers, a Norman knight of the Tees, yet the sword, known as the Conyers falchion, perhaps features the emblem of Morcar, a pre-conquest Earl of Northumbria, on its pommel. The story almost certainly has roots predating the Norman conquest. The worm tradition was continued in the form of a sword ceremony in which each newly appointed Bishop of Durham is presented with the sword upon entering their diocese, crossing the Tees for the first time. In earliest times, the ceremony took place in the middle of the River Tees at nearby Neasham Ford, but by the 19th century the preferred location was in the middle of the bridge at Croft-on-Tees near Darlington, just to the west. My Lord Bishop, I hereby present you with the falchion, wherewith the champion Conyers slew the worm, dragon, or fiery flying serpent, which destroyed man, woman, and child, in memory of which the king then reigning gave him the manor of Sockburn, to hold by this tenure, that upon the first entrance of every bishop into the county, the falchion should be presented. Directly overlooking the bridge, from the Yorkshire side, is the church and rectory of Croft-on-Tees, where the famed writer Lewis Carroll grew up as a boy. His father was the rector here and is buried in the churchyard alongside Lewis Carroll's mother. It is hard to believe that such a legend as the Sockburn worm would not inspire the extraordinary imagination of Lewis Carroll, who here wrote the opening verse to the Jabberwock, a nonsensical poem portraying the slaying of a wyvern with a sword. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that snatch. Beware the Jub-Jub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the Tum-Tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my breamish boy. O frabjous day, Callooh, Calais! He chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome raths outgrabe. What exactly the story of the Sockburn worm recalls is a matter of mystery, and a spot called the Grey Stone at Sockburn, which allegedly marks the burial spot of the beast, reveals no answers. The mysterious and magical nature of this sleepy spot is certainly intriguing, and was once visited, incidentally, by the poets Wordsworth and Coleridge. Indeed, it was at Sockburn that Wordsworth would first meet his future wife. Sockburn certainly occupied a central geographical location within the Kingdom of Northumbria in Anglo-Saxon and Viking times, and was in close proximity to a Roman road known today as Cade's Road. The road skirts the eastern side of the Sockburn Peninsula and crossed the River Tees at nearby Middleton Wanrow, where Pounties Lane recalls the site of Pons Teesy, a Roman bridge across the Tees. From here, the Roman road heads a few miles north to Sadberge, the capital of the Viking wapentake on the north side of the Tees, and then northwards to Old Durham, and then to Concangis, the Roman name for the fort of Chesterley Street, or Concaster as it was known in Anglo-Saxon and Viking times. And then the road continues northward to Newcastle upon Tyne, or Pons Aelius as it was known to the Romans. Cade's Road should not be confused with Deer Street, the great Roman road which crossed the River Tees at Piercebridge, west of Darlington, en route to Corbridge-on-Tyne. Sculptures, place names and legends, landholding grants and visits by Viking kings are all interesting features of the Viking heritage of the Tees Valley, but it was not until 2020 that one of the most tangible and astonishing links between the valley and its Vikings was confirmed. It came in the shape of a remarkable discovery concerning the little town of Yarm. This charming place stands within a loop of the River Tees on the old Yorkshire side of the river, and for many centuries it served as a port. Its wealth attracted a raid from Robert the Bruce in the 14th century, but the port was gradually eclipsed from the 17th century by the neighbouring town of Stockton-on-Tees downstream, which was in turn eclipsed by Middlesbrough. Yarm, in the old form of the name, was, according to the doggerel of one local wag, designed to keep out County Durham, and the looping Tees was tidal up to Wurzel, a little upstream from Yarm, until the opening of the Tees barrage at Stockton in 1995. The old name for Yarm is Anglo-Saxon, Fishweirs, Yarm, but it is hard to imagine this location not attracting the attention of later Vikings when they settled the Vale. In the 1950s, workmen laying a sewage pipe discovered an ancient helmet in Yarm's chapel yard not far from the Tees, and there was some speculation the helmet might be Viking, though no further serious study seems to have been undertaken. Displayed for many years as the Viking helmet in the excellent museum at Preston Hall in Preston Park just across the Tees near Eaglescliffe, where it can still be seen, the helmet recently came under the close scrutiny of experts at Durham University. A published paper in August 2020 highlighted the results of the investigation, which studied the methods of its manufacture, styling, materials and a dating of the helmet, which verified that this was, indeed, a 10th century Viking helmet. The discovery is a finding of international importance that made this not only the first Viking helmet found in Britain, but also confirmed it as only the second nearly complete Viking helmet found in the world. What is more, the workmanlike nature of the helmet shows that it was designed to be used rather than just for ceremony. It is the nearest we can come to meeting one of the valley's Viking warriors face to face. Of course, there may be a bigger story to tell. Perhaps Yarm, in its tidal location, served as a trading port or a market centre for the Vikings in times past. As landowners, Viking settlers in Yorkshire and the Tees Valley and in other parts of Viking-settled Britain would have filled upper and middle-ranking roles in society. They established new settlements and renamed or simply settled at older ones. However, the long-term influence of the Vikings in Britain was by no means localised to Viking-settled regions like the Tees Valley. Across the country, Viking words were absorbed into our language, enriching English as spoken everywhere in the world today. English words such as sky, scream, snare, hit, happy, husband, freckle, fog, birth, bleak, bylaw and bug are all of Viking origin. The list goes on. Anger, awe, cake, crawl, die, dirt, egg, gift, gust, knife, knot, leg, odd, ransack and rotten. They gave us scarce, skirt and shake, take and trust and thrust, weak and want. Even they and their, T-H-E-I-R, are Viking words. Of course, the Vikings also contributed to unique and distinct features of our regional dialects too, especially in the former Danelaw regions of northern and eastern England. As with their Anglo-Saxon predecessors, we should not think of the Viking settlement as a complete transplantation of earlier peoples. They would intermarry with locals, and within a generation or two, gradually and then peacefully were absorbed into the population, just in the same way as the later Normans would be. Genetic studies suggest the population of our country is still mostly dominated by the genes of much earlier peoples who have inhabited our lands for thousands of years. But Viking traces are there within many of us in the northeast and Yorkshire, and perhaps especially amongst those whose families have long lived within the Tees Valley, where there may be still more than a little Viking blood running in the veins. The Five Frontiers is written and narrated by David Simpson. Visit David's history site at englandsnortheast.co.uk. In our next series of videos, we will turn our attention to the second of the frontiers, County Durham and the River Wear, the land and valley of the Prince Bishops.